All right, so today I have Ian Allison with us from Scott's Bass Lessons. Ian is an amazing player, but also an amazing educator. And Ian, I'd really love to know a little bit more about you because you kind of came onto the scene in you've been with us for a while, but you're almost like an enigma. And I think that players really benefit from knowing who you are.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks. Thanks so much for having me on. I'll just give you kind of a brief, nutshell of kind of my story and how I got to where I am now. I was born and raised in Montana in a small town. Started playing, like the local bar that you could play on Main Street called the Kalispell Bar. When I was 16, playing, Tom Petty tunes and Creedence tunes, and then that was like the gig. And so I was like, well, if I want to do anything more than this, I need to go somewhere else. So I ended up, I was great friends with these guys in a band, and I was in a rock band, like an original rock band. We moved out to Minneapolis. I ended up going to school out here. We played in this rock band. So my teens and 20s, like pretty much 15, about like playing in a rock band and doing that like gritty, like band in a van life.
So it was
Uh-oh,
like,
are we band van life, right? And then when I turned 30, that kind of fell away. I started to do more things um, with other people as a side musician, right? Started to get into session work, doing that a little bit, and built that out. And then that whole decade of my 30s was all about that. And then when I turned 40, I thought I need something that I have some semblance of control over. So by the time I turned 40, I had taken a gig with Eric Hutchinson. I've been in his band now, and I'm the MD for about 6 years now. And that has been awesome. We toured a bunch, and then of course COVID, right?
Mhm.
So then it was sort of like, well, how can I think about the next 10, the next 20, the next 30, if I'm so lucky, as like a combination of those things. I need something I can control, something that's my own, but I still love playing for people. So that honestly became making content for the internet. Like it became, I had all of these session experiences under my belt from doing stuff at home and doing things in studios, all in Minneapolis. That's the other thing is I'm in Minneapolis. I'm not in Nashville. I'm not in LA. I'm not in New York. And yet I've made a career for myself.
Mhm.
And so I thought, wouldn't it be interesting, maybe, for the community to hear from someone like me that isn't in Nashville doing sessions, but is in Minneapolis? What does that look like, right?
Mhm.
And as a result, then, of me taking Instagram seriously and posting and trying to bring value to a community, Scott took notice of me. We started to work together, and that has just been incredible. Like working for him, he's amazing. He's the best boss I've ever had. I mean, such a cool dude, and so that has given me a lot of opportunities to start working with companies and really bring just more value to the bass community, which I'm super passionate about.
Yeah, yeah. I really do enjoy your lessons. I've been following you for a while on YouTube, and when I saw you come to Scott's bass lessons, I thought that was awesome. I love your content. I love the fact that you appreciate being a sideman, and that's something that I identify with as well. I want to come to an experience. I don't always want to create the experience, but I want to add to the experience. So whenever I work with a songwriter, it's like I kind of do something similar. What you do is what you said was you kind of put the bass down and you try to get inside the song. And when I heard you say that, I was like, wow, I felt the camaraderie there. The camaraderie of like, I can identify with what you're saying a lot, and it's I feel like you're really inside the head of the player. And I think your lessons are excellent. I think they're well defined. I think 8 seconds left, the countdown. um, I think you have the right amount of humor with the right disposition to educate, and you bring it's almost like a tech, not a technician. You are a technician because you're playing, you're working, you're out there working, you're bringing that element to it, but you're also like you have that background of like real life experience, not just okay, this is what I learned in college, this is what I'm putting out here. You're not just relaying it. You have real world experience, which I really appreciate, and I think a lot of
Yeah,
players.
yeah. Yeah, I think for me too, I had some hard knocks in the beginning. A story I tell a lot is that I got fired from my first session, you know. So I showed up. I'd been in this rock band for a long time, and it was a producer that produced my band. He got me my first session. I was so excited. Okay, here it is. I'm a session guy now, you know. And then he was like, "Hey, on this bridge, let's do like a McCartney thing." And if I'm honest, I
Mhm.
didn't really know what that meant. I knew that he was referring to Paul McCartney. At the time, I was probably 24. I thought that Paul McCartney was maybe in a band called the Beatles, but I mean, I was like a metal kid. I was like a rock and roll kid, hip hop, electronic music. And so I pretended to know what he
Mhm.
meant and tried to play something. I just played more notes, probably like up high on the neck. And he was like, okay, hey, we're going to be done for today. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to go out and buy Beatles number ones. And I want you to buy Hitsville, USA, get into McCartney, get into Jamerson. And then after you've ingested that material, call me back. But don't call me before that.
Mhm.
And it was incredible. I mean, it was like, it was an amazing lesson. But I will say, I packed up my gear and went into my car and wept.
Oh, of course.
Like,
I think we
it
all have an
was just
experience like that.
crushing.
Yeah, but you know what?
Yeah.
Those
But I
those
mean, those are the
experiences,
things.
yeah, those are the things that build character, right? Those are the things that you come back and you're like, you know what? The next time I'm gonna know this, right? And I love what you said about that. Is like I feel like a lot of us are kind of like we only listen to a very small select group of players, and really we want to have bigger ears, you know. And I see that from you because the Carol Loudon, like when you did that session, like you played that, I was like, oh my god, I gotta check this out. I was like, it blew me away. That album blew me away. I was like, this is just incredible. And then I played it for other people,
Yeah, she's.
but
Oh, I love that. She's incredible, and she's a dear friend in Minneapolis too. I mean, and that's I something else about being in Minneapolis is I play with all of these artists that are incredible, but that aren't huge artists,
mhm,
right? But I believe in them. I think about it like Berry Gordy when he in Motown. You know, Aretha Franklin was just a girl up the street. She
sure,
wasn't a star. The dudes
yep,
that sang in the Temptations weren't the Temptations. They were four dudes that just sang around the corner, you
yeah,
know. And he believed in that community. And I got to go tour Motown when I was on tour, and that really stuck with me of like, do I have to move to LA? Obviously, there would be more networking opportunities, there would be more playing opportunities. But what if I looked at someone like Cara? She's so amazing. And if anybody's watching this, Cara Loudon, oh, just
yeah. She's
incredible, just
that album is
amazing
so great,
voice. I
but
think so too.
yeah,
And
it's
you know, so I just wanted to look at her like
yeah.
a star, like a potential amazing star because I think she is. I think she has
Oh yeah, yeah.
that
She's incredible.
ability.
Yeah, the writing on that was great, where I was going with the big ears, like I can hear your elements, like you're able to switch on a dime. Like in that session, you're using a bass synth on there. You got that pedal, and you're kind of like you're pulling those notes into pitch and pulling them out. And I love that. I felt like that was really like intuitive with her vocals, and like it just helped to really define the song. You were playing to the song, not to your ego, which I love.
Right.
And I think that that's where I wanted to kind of focus on was because you play you play with a lot of different players. And being in Minneapolis, you're kind of centralized in the country, so you're able probably to touch base West and East Coast and get those players kind of networking. And I think that your sound design. Like when I think of you, I think sound design. Because you go from like the bass six to a country linesman kind of thing to like a synth bass thing. I'm like, I love that, and I think the versatility there is really amazing. And I think that's maybe having a bigger toolbox for bass players instead of like this narrow depth of vision that a lot of us have is like, okay, well, I'm a jazz bass player. That's all I play. And that really limits your networking possibilities. It limits who you're gonna see and how you're gonna network with them, and how you're gonna develop. Because you might come across somebody who's outside your wheelhouse and it's just gonna blow your mind and create a new language. And
Absolutely. I
I
mean,
appreciate you for that.
yeah, thanks. I mean, and I love thumbprint sounds. So my whole thing is I love classic instruments. I love classic sounds. And I don't just mean from the 50s and 60s. I mean even from the 90s and from the 2000s. And when I feel like something kind of gets into the lexicon of, of pop music, I want to know what that thing is. Like I was just watching an Adam Neely video where he talks about hyperpop, and like
Hmm.
Rebecca Black just did this remix of Friday, and it's this whole new thing. It's almost like a TikTok genre
Right,
that
right.
has this very specific bass sound, and that stuff is fascinating to me. Just like Glenn Campbell's playing on Wichita Lineman with a bass six is fascinating to me. Just like Doug Pinnick playing a 12 string with a
Hmm.
distorted top end is fascinating to me. Just like playing, spring reverb short on a Guild Starfire with a pick and flat wounds is right. So for
Yeah.
me, it's about like really, really narrow slices that are
Hmm.
very distinctive, but a bunch of them. And it's not to say that then you can't have something that's your favorite thing. Like one of my favorite things in the world is playing this old 68J
Oh
with
yeah.
flats on it through synth pedals and sounding my best to do like to sound like a Moog, right? Or to
Hmm.
sound like an Arp Odyssey. So that's one of my favorite things. And I get called a lot to do that, or DM'd a lot to do that. It's funny. It's like we used to say, oh, I get called to do that. No one calls anymore. They text or DM. Like
Sure.
that's how sessions happen now. But this instrument, I love too this thing of like old and new, where you're using this old tech combined with new tech to maybe make more modern sounds. Boy, there's just like an aesthetic of that really
Mhm.
resonates with me. Um, but yeah, I want to serve a song, right? So if I'm not going to show up with this and synth pedals to play on something that needs to be like more like old school R&B or indie rock, or
Hmm.
right, like I want to do the thing that is the thing for the song and the artist. I'm a bit of a people pleaser too, so like if I bring the right thing and an artist is like, yes, that's a huge win for me, right? So then through that, I have discovered that I kind of gravitate towards certain things where I go, oh, I I love this lane, or I happen to love this lane, and it so people have this critique of side musicians of like, oh, these banal, bland players. I think that nothing is further from the truth, or we don't have to think of ourselves as that, right?
Hmm.
Instead, we can think of ourselves as sampling all of these different things to kind of like come to bring something to coalesce this thing that happens to be our voice. And that so I'm thinking about making a record that's like bass six, trem, spring reverb sounds over like minimal drum machine
Yeah.
stuff. So kind of like this minimalist drum production with like OK Corral. And,
Hmm.
and that is from the session work that I've done. It's not like that music doesn't exist. Like I haven't listened to minimal drum production bass six records because they don't exist.
Right.
But those two things coming together is a result of me playing sessions and getting inspired by really digging in to those different lanes. I'm just fascinated by that stuff. So that's what it is for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you could even say, like, as a session player, I mean, that used to be the thing was like, as a sideman, that was your education. Like when you say, like, because you said bland sidemen, and like, the first, I think of like, Paul Jackson. I'm like, no, no, that dude was never bland, or like, think
Absolutely.
of all the guys who
Tony
played Miles.
Levin.
Yeah, Tony Levin. Yeah, no, the signature sound. Absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
or, Ray Brown, like you want to talk about like just players that were like they you came up through the other artist, that was the school, that's how you learned to, and you just developed your craft until you're able to, move out, which those guys kind of did. They moved on and developed. I mean, um, it's really something, I love that.
Yeah,
So
man.
so your background, so your formal training though is on the road, right? Like did you go to school for music, or did you kind of get it from the bandstand?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I went to college, but I was already in this band that I thought was going to take over the world. So I had that kind of like teenager uh naivety of like, well, I'm already doing the thing that I want to be doing. But then I had this internal fear too of like, "Ugh, what if this doesn't work out? So I actually went to school. I got a communications and political science degree, which is hilarious. I mean, I had, but I really enjoyed that time too. I actually like writing and it taught me a lot. I loved it. But no, I didn't do music. And then it's interesting. I was just, playing on the road, doing tons of gigs, and then started to play with different artists. And then I ended up taking a job teaching at a college. I taught at a small little private school in Minneapolis, in downtown Minneapolis, for about 10 years. And that was amazing too, because, I would have these students coming in going like, oh, in jazz, in like jazz workshop, I have to play the head of Donna Lee. And I'm going, absolutely. We'll tackle that next week. And then I would go home and furiously. I mean, it was like that to me. Honestly, teaching is such an amazing education, right? Because you have to be on top of the game in terms of what you're communicating to students,
Absolutely.
right?
Well, you have to understand the material to be able to to give it back, so you have to
Yes.
truly have a functioning understanding. If you
Yeah.
don't, it's, there's a lot of players out there who are really great players but not great educators, and I think that there's a separation, and the ones that you find that are just like these immense fountains of information, you're like, oh my god, like these guys are amazing, like Yannick. Yannick
These
is one
guys
of those
have
guys. Just stacks of books. Like I studied with Tony Gray, and I also studied with Yannick. And like Tony Gray used to have like he had like stacks of books that he kept all his notes in, and they were like meticulous. And you'd go for an hour lesson, 5 hours later, you're leaving, and he's like, "Here, take this with you too." And
right.
those guys just they're so into it, which leads me to another question though. And you brought it up when you said teaching. um, there's almost like this shame of having a side gig or side hustle, right? And there really isn't. There shouldn't be, because music, sometimes music needs to be unfettered, and to be unfettered, it's like the cover band versus the original band, right? It's like, well, you work a day gig so you can play the original stuff. You work the wedding band so you can pay the bills. And there's nothing wrong with either of those options, but I think that a lot of people have this unrealistic view of what the world is and how they can survive. Because as you and I were talking earlier, I said I have a friend who's, is on tour with a pretty big act. The act, obviously, COVID. He finds himself in a situation where he's without a gig for almost 2 years coming up. By the time they're able to go back out. And there should be no shame in being able to use those skills, whether it's education, whether it's developing, your skills to record, to produce, or even something that's non-music. It still brings inspiration back. How do you perceive that?
I totally agree. I think the bottom line is happiness. I think there are people that they don't know that they love to teach, and maybe they should check it out. But also, if they hate teaching and it drains them, that's not the right thing, right? Maybe it's making content, maybe it's production, maybe it's another lane in music. I think it's about trying a bunch of things and really understanding what brings you happiness and what fills you up versus what drains you. For me, I love education. I'm an
Mhm.
educator at heart. I don't totally know why, but I really do enjoy this thing of like talking about the thing that I do and trying to break it down to something that's really simple and that's something that is inspirational.
Mhm.
So I'm not the guy that is going to give huge pages and exercises of, all of these things to work on. I'm more of kind of a concept guy talking about time, technique, tone. Like I love to talk to students about like how to bring in inspiration. So for me, watching movies and hearing sounds from soundtracks,
Mhm.
I draw inspiration from a lot of things, right? And I think that transcription is a word that is mired in sort of jazz academy of like, oh, we transcribe
Mhm.
Miles, we transcribe Brecker. But I want to transcribe the construction site, you know?
Yeah.
And that to me, like thinking about how to then you hear and like, oh, how do I make that sound on my instrument? And then how am I going to bring that into a creative space for an artist? That's what I'm super passionate about.
Mm.
And it involves a lot of rule breaking. It involves a lot of convention breaking of people saying, here's how to do this. Here's how you need to think about this in an academic way. I find that my approach is more like, well, what are the sounds that you love? What are you inspired by? Do you want to play for people? If you do, figure out a way to bring that inspiration in. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the Miles solo. I mean, that's wonderful too. But
Hmm.
what if it's Square Pusher? What if it's Bjork? What if it's the dog barking and like I want to bring in more. I want to open up that sort of academic space to include more things than just jazz.
Right, right. Absolutely. I mean, I think that, there's power in a phrase, even just if all you can play is that first lick from Donna Lee, or that might be the only part that's inspiring you. That might be, if you can analyze that little piece and take that and apply that somewhere else, I think that there's power in that.
For sure.
There's power in everything. There's Square Pusher. If you take it and you're like, oh, I love that. The Bjorkestra, if you ever heard of them, you're like, those guys were inspired
Hmm.
by those
Yeah.
elements of Bjork. Um, there is so much content out there. It's almost overwhelming at times, right? And you're like, and for a lot of players, especially new players, there's a lot of content. I recently posted on my Instagram. I put up a picture of John Deacon. As like inspirational guys, like just so melodic, so melodic. And I had a couple of people go, "Who is that?" and I was like, "Wow." So I think in the age that we're in technology, voices sometimes get drowned out because there's so many.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. Yeah, and the flashy stuff rises to the top, right? And
Mhm.
I just think I think that's okay. I'm not mad at that at all. Like there's people that are like, "Oh, unless you're slapping or unless you're doing this flashy stuff, you're not going to, the algorithm's not going to prioritize you." I don't care. I'm playing for legacy. Like I'm not playing for numbers. I'm not playing for subs, likes. I'm putting out content that I genuinely believe in. And I think that comes across. And then if people want to check it out, great. And if they don't, totally cool. Like I am totally happy to build a slow and steady organic thing based on the things that I really love. Like that was something too. Like I just needed to be me. When I started to post more, the thing that I said was I'm not going to chase algorithm and I'm not going to care if someone likes it or doesn't or thinks that I'm corny or like I just need to be me and that's going to make me happy. And I think that's actually really difficult. It's really difficult for people to go, I'm going to be myself on the internet. People
No,
are always like,
absolutely.
"Oh, well if I post this, will so and so like it? Will so and so think it's stupid? What will my mom or uncle or friends think?"
Hmm.
Right? Like I think it's about deciding that that doesn't matter and
Yeah,
deciding that you're
absolutely.
going to post the thing that is going to make you happy and that's hopefully going to bring some value to a community.
Absolutely. I think that's what I found so refreshing about your content was that the approach was not you were looking at it from the song. You were respecting the
Yeah.
development of the song versus the ego. And I think that when that's the difference between that song that you hear that it's quick and it's over and you forget about it versus the one that sticks with you and then you call back that melody a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later. There's something said about that where it's like it's well thought out, it's well put together. It's not just listening, oh well, there's a great bass line, that's it. The song together works and you're like it stands up, it's legacy like you said. And
Yeah, for
that's what
sure.
drew me to you. When I heard your stuff, I was like, man, I was like, this guy's great. I love your approach. And I think a lot of bass players can get a lot from what you're putting out there. I really feel like um it's real. I feel like what you're saying is real, and it's connectable. As in players in our community, especially bass players. Like, I mean, the thing that we have to realize as bass players is that we only, the person that only really cares about bass players is other bass players. Nobody else cares
Yeah,
about
yeah,
us.
yeah.
You know,
Right.
Guitar players, they have their fans. Singers, definitely. Bass players, we only like each other, so we got to respect each other.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely, man.
Cool. So I want to bring up something else. The Corey Wong connection. So you know Corey, and you've done work with Corey as well. How did that happen?
I mean, Corey, I've known Corey for a really long time. Like before Corey and I were playing things before he was like an international superstar. So I was the guy that Corey would call like there's two scenarios where Corey and I would work together. One, like the three guys before me were busy. Or two, if it were something more in the like rock, indie rock zone. That's sort of where I'm from, right? And so he grew up in more of like the Prince camp. I was not in that camp at all, but we respected each other so much. I mean, just the musicianship, and I would always come prepared when he would hire me, and so we had a great working relationship. We've done a bunch of sessions together, and so I had written this like slap bass thing, and probably like so many people watching this, like you've got a bunch of, voice memos in your phone or whatever. Like, I mean, I've had that stuff forever, mini disc recorders before there was a phone, and I had this like slap thing, and I remember listening to it thinking like, this is good, but I'm not gonna put it out. Like, I'm not gonna hang my hat on like the slap bass guy thing. But I wonder if Corey would like it. So I just sent it to him, like in a text, and was like, dude, I wrote this thing. It sounds like you to me. Would you be interested in just having it? Or I don't know. And he was like, oh man, I love it. Let's write it. And so I went over to his house and we ended up hanging out an afternoon and co-writing this tune together. It's called That's My Passport Photo. It's on his first record, just Corey Wong and the Green Screen Band. I think it's the last tune on the first record, but like I was pumped, man.
That's great.
And yeah, and I ring this bell a lot, which is if you're sitting around and you're bummed out, COVID, lack of opportunity, whatever, go through your phone. You probably have a bunch of ideas in there that you're waiting to put on your record that you haven't made and that you're not gonna make. And so why not take the coolest thing and send it to somebody and say, this is yours? Or like, what if we worked on this thing together? And that led to a really cool collaboration with Corey. And I do that quite a bit where I'll have something and I'll listen to it and I'll think, who does this sound like? And then I'll just send it to somebody. And I've done that with a bunch of different bands, and it always leads to something. It may not lead to a song on a record and a co-write, but it leads to a conversation. It leads to then them saying, oh, hey, Ian, would you be available next week to do this thing? It leads to a network. And I never
Absolutely.
look at it like, oh, a networking opportunity. I look at it as a gift. Hey, I wrote this thing and it reminds me of you here. Can you use it? With zero expectation of
Mhm.
it, like, making my career or anything like that. But that is something that is so actionable and tangible that everyone can do. If you're a creative person, you have all of these things, stuffed away in some kind of medium. Send it to somebody.
Yeah, that's great advice, because that was actually going to be probably like my penultimate question was going to be networking for especially for players out there. It's like, how do you network? Because I remember you said in one of your recent Scott's bass lessons, you said it was on YouTube as well, but it's not always about the money. It's about sometimes just being part of that development of that song. I don't
For
know.
sure.
I don't know if you remember saying that, but it was really great because it touched me, because I thought about it, I was like, I got a call for a session gig, and I was like, they were like, how much for the session? I'm like, I gave them my day rate, and the day rate put them out. It just dropped it. It was like they were like, okay, well, we can't afford that. And what I should have done is, like, it's right after I saw I saw your video right after that, I was like, it probably would have been a really cool experience. I probably should have said, let me hear the music first. Send me the music and we'll talk about it later. Because
Yeah.
especially right now, there's a higher value, I feel like, in being part of something, recording something, putting music in the world versus just
Yep.
a dollar payback.
Dude, here's the thing. I I'm really passionate about this, and I'm glad you asked this because in the beginning, I feel like so many players need to appear professional. And what is that? Well, it's talking about a day rate, and I have a day rate and I have a song rate that I like to get. But I always say, if I have the idea that it's going to be cool, and that seems shallow, but if someone asks me to do something and I get excited, everyone knows that feeling. You get that
Mhm.
welling, that excitement inside. You maybe get goosebumps. That you have to chase that. That is more important than anything. That's more important than all the money in the world because it will mean that it will put you, if you're excited about it, then it will lead to other opportunities that you're excited about. And that stuff leads to money. So I always tell people, this was actually, I saw Justin Meldal Johnson do a master class where he just talked for like a bass player thing years ago. And he talked about this where like the money is all secondary or tertiary or whatever third is, I think, um, because the experience and another at bat is more important than anything. If you can say, "Oh yeah, I got to play on this," and oh, and then you make some content around it, the we are useless unless we're playing. I feel this way. I am useless unless I'm playing on a great song.
Mhm.
Without a great song, I am useless. So the great song and the opportunity is the money. That's the value. The money is, I don't think about it.
Sure.
And so what ends up happening for me a lot is someone will say, hey, what do you need to do this day or song or whatever? And I say, here's what I usually do, or I'll do it for nothing. Like, I don't care. Like, I never feel like then someone is like, oh, well, I'm going to take advantage of you and book you for nothing. No one does that. I say, here's what I get, but I'll do it for free.
Hmm.
And someone goes, oh, well, you don't have to do it for free. Well, right. So, dude, check this out. One other thing. LaFave and I were talking, Tim LaFave.
Hmm.
He was saying to me the other day that he gets 50 DMs a day of people asking him for things, asking him about pedal settings, asking him about this stuff. And he said, if anyone just would bring me value instead of taking from me, if anyone would give to me instead of taking. And so, boy, that it really resonated with me. So here's something. When I approached Scott from Scott's Bass Lessons, and what I said to him was, I'm good at X, Y, and Z. I feel really confident about these three skills. So if you need any of that from me, I will do it for you for a year for zero money. I would love to. I'm a huge fan. I love what you do. Let me help you. How can I bring you the most value? And guess what? And that really resonated with him.
Hmm.
I didn't say, hey man, here's what I do. Here's my rate. Here's what I'm going to, like I didn't come in like that. I came in and said, I love you. How can I be helpful to you? That's what I try to do with every company that I work for, or
Hmm.
like every opportunity that I have to demo gear. I'm not saying, here's what I need to make this video. I go, how can I help you do what you
Hmm.
want to do? And then it's never, no one ever, like Scott didn't say, great, I'm going to take you up on that and I'm not going to pay you for a year. It doesn't happen.
No,
They
no.
go, oh wow, that's so cool, let me throw you this project and see how you do and see if you like it. And then that leads to, hey, will you come on part-time? Hey, will you come on full-time? you
Hmm.
know so same way, like if anyone sends me a song and they're like, what's your rate? I say, this is my rate or free, you choose. And then sometimes they'll just put it in they'll just say, well, would $100 be cool or whatever? And I say, absolutely, if it's good, right? if
Yeah.
if I get excited about it, if I think it's cool. And that is huge, because the song, being able to say, oh, I played on this. Like one other quick example, there's a good friend of mine in Minneapolis named JT Bates, and he just played on the last Taylor Swift record. He's a drummer, and
Hmm.
he's like a jazz drummer. And he was saying, he's like, it paid like pretty well. He's like, but I would have paid thousands of dollars to do it, because then to say Taylor Swift
Yep.
is more capital than it's worth more than the money you get from playing the session, right?
Absolutely.
Like that at bat is huge.
Absolutely.
So anybody that's out there that is like, oh, how, I want to appear professional, don't think about appearing professional. Think about appearing um excited and enthusiastic. Whoever you want to work with, approach them and say, I love what you do. Let me play on something for you. I would like, let me send you this beat. Let me send you this bass line with no expectation and for free. And
Hmm.
that will lead to happiness and money, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree. So, Ian, we are coming to the end of our interview, and I would love to know what can we expect from you in the near future or in the far off future? What should we expect to
Oh
see?
man, I mean, I was right in the middle of a great tour with Eric Hutchinson when COVID happened. It was a trio tour. I was playing bass. I was playing all of the like leads, all of the guitar solos on bass, like fuzz bass, and it was just oh, it was so fun. I hope we get to go out on the road with that again. I love playing with Eric. He's one of my favorite people in the world. Tons of stuff's coming at Scott's Bass Lessons. I've got courses coming. I'm going to be revamping a program there that's like a feedback program called Student Focus. I'm doing
Awesome,
more YouTube videos. I've got videos coming out breaking down records that I'm pumped about. Next one coming out is going to be Graceland by Paul
awesome.
Simon. So all the Bakiti Kumalo fretless playing. I've got one coming out on moving pictures, which I'm so pumped about. Um, I'm going to be working with some companies doing some gear demos,
It's awesome.
playing on, yeah, man. And hopefully I'd like this year to put out an EP too of some music. I really would love to put out like a bass six or like trem spring reverb bass record with minimal beats. It's a sound that I hold near and dear to my heart. So I just want to put some music out. So yeah, man,
Very
just trying to
cool.
keep all the plates, just keep all the plates spinning, you know?
That's what you gotta do, man. Just like spinning plates, right?
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today with Bass Musician Magazine. It was really a pleasure getting to dig in with you on what you're doing and getting a better understanding of the man behind the bass lessons. And I'm sure we'll be seeing much more great things coming from you with your session work and also with Scott's bass lessons.
Cheers. Thanks so much for having me, man. It was a real treat.
Thank you.